Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where everybody is in the world today. Very happy to be on this podcast with my beautiful co host, Laura Brennan Ballet. How are you on this, I believe, rainy 4th of July weekend?
I'm going to choose to be very sunny today because here in Connecticut, specifically on the East Coast, we've had quite a bit of rain this summer season so far. So I'm sunny today.
Okay, I like that. You
Yeah.
choose the life we live, and that I think is so incredible.
Yep.
Speaking of lives,
Yes.
our topic today is quite an interesting one. It's something that I think everybody has asked more than once in their lives. Great philosophers have debated this. What is the meaning of life? Why are we here? Why are we mired in this physical existence? What is it all about? And of
Yes.
course, different people have different takes on that.
No small topic.
Not a small topic at all. Well,
No.
I will say that growing up Christian, one of the things that I was always taught from yay big was where Jesus said very simply, this is the whole obligation of man to fear God and give him glory. Now, at the time, I kind of looked at this and I was like, that can't be it. Like, that can't be all that there is. Like, that doesn't sound even remotely feasible. And then as I've grown and delved deeper into the meaning behind those words, right? Because also as a child, you hear the word fear, it you immediately embody this, this terror, this sort of like, oh, I must be scared of this thing, which is not what the ancients were trying to impart to us at all. I think when you and I were discussing it, we were more talking about the fear of disappointing someone that you really love and care about, right? It's not that you fear they're going to punish you or hurt you. It's more a case of when you really love and respect somebody, you would not want to do something that's going to deeply hurt them, right? And I think that's really intriguing. And then that then brings us to, as you're progressing through life and we're having all these random events happening that sometimes are good, sometimes are bad, what are those about? What is the actual meaning behind that? Is it karmic? Is it something that we can build on? Is it just random events?
Yeah.
What does it all mean? So I'd love to hear your take on it, Laura, from on those two sort of perspectives.
Yeah, I just got this feeling knowing my rebel nature. If I was at that time with Jesus and he even brought the word fear out, I can already feel the energy of resistance to that word because of that reason. It's seated
Mm,
somehow in the psyche of the collective that we were supposed to fear, and then fill in that blank, whether fear God, fear religious leaders, fear political leaders, fear the police, whatever it may be, and how we take that word and we take that energy and we attach it to very specific experiences. Where if we look at it in the light of how you just expressed it, it wasn't really meant to say be fearful of the wrath of God or etc.
mm,
I think it was more, which we're going to touch upon down the road here, but more of the journey of self-actualization. It was the accountability and the responsibility, I think, that we were seeing outside of ourselves, but meant to be reflected internally. And it wasn't about fear necessarily. It was, as you said, when we disappoint, if you steal, if you lie, if you intentionally hurt, there's a current of emotionality that comes through those choices and those behaviors. So for me, I think that was put into kind of the human matrix so that we would begin to understand that we don't want to live that way truly. And we want to always be striving to be better, to tap into that higher nature of ourself. And for most of us, we do that through God energy, God force, connection to religion and faith and all of that. The other aspect of um, questioning. And I was just having this conversation. I was at a family wedding over the weekend, and we were talking about being in this gathering and on this beautiful farm in this state here in Massachusetts. And there was just this facility that was stunning, and the horses were being fed, and there was a big farm truck, and the white billowy curtains and the chandeliers and all the rustic wood, and we were celebrating this beautiful union of hope, right? Two young kids getting married well under their 30. And we were talking about the randomness or the coincidences or the karma and all the variations of everyone's mindset around this. Some people were like, there is no such thing as karma. Everything is just a coincidence. There is no, law of reciprocity. All of these unique ways that humans look at the world. And I remember just sitting back for a moment. And again, you can imagine everyone eating and laughing and the music playing. And, we were having this very kind of worldly discussion with various people, and I didn't know all of them. And just observing how beautiful and wonderful it is that we all think so differently. But what are the commonalities? And it was brought down to love, to hope, to faith, however we all individually put it. And so I thought it was quite unique that even in times where someone gets hurt, there's an accident, and even if someone says it's random, they just were at the wrong place at the wrong time, right? There's those of us that know that there is no wrong place and no wrong time, right? Because any amount of other events could have happened that would have completely changed that event. But even if we say, okay, wrong place, wrong time, just a coincidence, we all still come together and have this prayer or this conversation around the well-being of this person. So I think part of the meaning to life is that no matter how disconnected we sometimes appear, if we were to calmly sit and really begin to converse, we realize how similar the nature of our humanness truly is.
You said something so beautiful there about, instead of focusing on the disconnects between us, to rather learn to focus on the similarities.
Yeah.
And there have to be similarities. Yes, we are all unique. Okay, that is a given.
Yes.
However, and of course, I don't take into account people who firmly believe in everything being just down to chance, okay, in this what I'm about to say. So please just bear with me just a second. If you do believe in some form of higher power, something that did create the universe in which we exist, then on some level, you believe that each and every atom in this universe is an expression of that divine, of that divinity, right? Therefore, each and every one of us is an expression of that divine.
Exactly.
And if we're able to see the divinity in ourselves, we're able to see the divinity in each other, right? And it really does come down to actually to what Jesus says, fear God and give him glory. And then I think in the same passage, he goes on to say, you must love your God with your whole heart, mind, and soul. And it's interesting that the whole theme of all the scriptures, and I'm not just talking about the Bible here, I'm talking about the Bhagavad Gita, I'm talking about the Taoist texts, just everything that's out there, it all comes down to love.
Yes.
Right? And I was on TikTok the other day. I know, odd place to find gems of wisdom, but I really did find a gem of wisdom there. And somebody said something that I actually have often thought about. In that same passage where Jesus says, you must love your God, or he says, the law and the prophets comes down to two things. You must love your God with your whole heart, mind, and soul, and you must love your fellow man as yourself. And this person said something which has literally been something that I've meditated on for decades now. He says, in actual fact, that's 3 commands, if you think about it. Because you got to love your God, you've got to love your neighbor, but in order to love your neighbor, you've got to love yourself.
Yeah.
Right?
We talk about this so often, right? At the Shift & Co.
We do.
it would be a disservice not only to yourself, but again, to the collective family, the human family, if we miss the opportunity to take those internal journeys, to become so connected to who we are and why we are here and what is the meaning and the purpose of life for us as an individual. It's right. It becomes very distorted if we go outside of ourselves and try to give or gain wisdom, insight, knowledge without the true authentic experience of loving oneself. And this is why so
Mm.
many of us, right, we do love through the eyes of God. We do love through the eyes of, and fill in that blank. You know me, you can worship a butterfly, a tree, it does not matter to me. I used to say from my author that I loved when I was a young person growing up, Leo Buscaglia, he wrote all about this and really seeing the face of God in everything. And whatever God means to each person listening, that's not the point of the conversation, right? This is the point of how do we at this juncture in humanity recalibrate our own journey so that we deepen something within us so that we can expand beyond as one global force of love, of compassion, of evolution. And for me, this is really where I feel and see the meaning of life. It is to evolve. However you
Oh.
choose to evolve is, for me, I respect kindness and compassion and thought and positive intention, and the evolution through that lens. And anyone who speaks of connectivity to anything outside of themselves, I think, there has to be the journey within. How did you come to that connection to God? How did you listen to the words of, and again, keep filling in those blanks. What is the driving force within you that connects you to that belief, that story, that religion, that book, that partnership, all of it? And I really think the more we find meaning, and again, I'll go back to when I was at this wedding and I was listening to everyone, and I embraced the uniqueness and the different ways of looking at life. And had I not allowed my mind to become open and explore
Mm.
without judgment for that time and just listen to what mattered to all these other people and how it mattered to them, why it mattered to them. It really was a beautiful expansion experience for myself because I easily could have said, "No, that doesn't fit. That doesn't work." Why would you think that? How do you make sense out of that statement? And instead, I went into this observance and this experience with listening to it all with absolutely no judgment. And I
Mm.
chose to hear the words and tap into the emotion behind the expression as a tool of expansion for myself. And it was really quite almost, I would say, an out of body, but I don't mean it literally experience. I tapped in to the possibilities of all nature sitting within every human being at the exact same moment, and it was quite a unique experience. It I don't know why I chose that moment at that time. Um, Certainly no, it wasn't a coincidence because it had a great impact on me,
Yeah.
and I think that's what mattered. Yeah.
Well, that's actually incredibly beautiful because, sorry, and for, I suppose not for some odd reason, but mainly because of my background, I'm quoting Jesus a lot today. But
Okay. Yeah.
he said something about he who is faithful in little will be faithful in much,
Mm.
and it's so interesting because what you were just talking about there, it's a small moment in time.
Yeah.
It's maybe not somewhere where someone would stop and go, oh, how can I best reflect the qualities of the divine in this moment?
Yeah.
Yet that's what we should be doing all the time, right?
And it's what
And
I
I'm
saw.
actually, as we're going,
Yeah.
yeah.
It's what I saw. As you said, the divine. And I think that's what that's what I am trying to express now. Whether and again, we had a story, we were talking too about Jesus and religious leaders. And, I said, whether you believe or not in a specific man or a specific story or a certain way that you perceive the force of God or nature or even the force of humanity, what do you gain by resisting the possibility through the expression of that said person or that said God or that said story? And what would you gain from the expansion and the openness to it? And it shifted for a moment. It just got pin drop silence, even though it didn't, because the music and the dancing and but it did. And that's when everyone kind of collectively was like, oh. And it was for that quick second in life where they realized the journey is in here so that it can be expressed out there. And then for many of us, that journey within as well as externally comes from the connection to our source, our faith, and how we look at the world. And just a side note, and we won't go down this path now, but I'm starting to read on biogeometry and the true mathematical equations and the quantum fields that actually are creating all of this. And then you go to
Right.
put that up against the God, a God, our God, or however you want to look at it, and where did it fit in? And kind of going back just for a moment with Jesus, and we had this conversation where I said to someone, Eve, who am I to say what exists or what doesn't? All I know is this right now, maybe 100-year span in billions of years of things that my brain can't comprehend. Who am I to say that that did not exist or it did not exist that way? All we can do is look at history, but we know history has burned knowledge. It has destroyed knowledge. So we have stories that were created from something and then shifted through the eyes and the lens and the experience of man. So we have to, I think, be discerning, but our instinct and our nature still has something calling, where I think that's where the connection to the divine is at its most beautiful. We all know when we put all the doubt or all the fear or all the confusion or all the questioning down, we still know that there's something divine in this human experience and
Yes.
in one another. And I think for me, that may be the meaning of our lifetime.
So I definitely agree with you there, and I feel that deeply in my soul, because something that I was meditating on quite a bit last week was actually humanity in general. And you and I have had this discussion before, and I think I brought it up as well on the podcast, where I'll look out at the world and the state it's in, and just how many truly disturbing things happen on a daily basis, right? The contrast is strong at the moment and has been for quite some time, quite a few millennia. And that then, always takes me down this dark rabbit hole of, well, why even bother with the human experiment? Why even be here? Why not just wipe the whole race off the face of the planet, send the soul somewhere else, and let them do their evolution in a better space, a better frame of mind, etc. And then when I really started to think about it, and I was thinking about the fact that we live in a universe that at its base is based on polarity, right? There's always light and dark, positive and negative, push and pull. It's just the nature of the universe in which we live. And yet we know that the divine is completely different. There is no polarity there. It's pure love. The scriptures, it doesn't matter which ones you subscribe to, the Quran, the Bible, Buddhism, etc., they all say the same thing, that God is love. Not God loves,
Right.
God is love.
Right.
It's an energy, a frequency that the divine is in its purest form.
Right.
And I was meditating on that a bit, and then I really stopped to think again about the fact that we are reflections of that divinity. And it came through to me that what tends to happen is at each human's core, and I am barring now people who have mental illness and who have psychopathic traits, etc., right? But each person at their core is good. No person wakes up in the morning and goes, do you know what? I really could go for some genocide today.
Right.
Just doesn't happen, right?
Yeah.
With my morning coffee. It just doesn't happen, right?
Certainly not
They
at
will
5 years old, right?
right. It's something that you get pushed into. People do horrific things because their back's up against the wall, or more pertinently, it's usually when we start to move in groups. And this is the other thing that I started to notice from a psychological perspective
Mm,
is when the individual becomes a group, you get that mob effect, right?
right.
So the police officers will often speak about the fact that the most peaceable, most peaceful person on the planet will get swept up in a protest and will suddenly start throwing rocks.
Yeah.
Not in their nature whatsoever, but the polarity of the situation affects them to the point where they just go with the flow. How beautiful would it be instead if we really, and again, and this is why I said earlier, take those small moments day to day to practice reflecting out that divine spark and accepting that divine spark back in. Because then when something like that happens, you're so deeply entrenched in your individuality because you're so deeply connected to that divine spark within you that you can go, no, this is not loving. This is not in the best interest of the collective. And it's certainly not in my best interest either. I'm going to choose to take a step back and figure out what I can do to heal the situation instead.
And we all see that. We see it in ourselves. We know if we're getting, fired up very quickly. We know if we're becoming emotionally reactive instead of with a calm resolve, responding right from positive intelligence. However, you want to look at it, we know whether we're a mom, a dad, what kind of partnerships, when we're in work, whether we're leadership or team player. We just know we connect to seeing and feeling, I'll use the word right and wrong, negative, positive, right? We know when distortion is entering into the field of
Mm,
experience. There's something in us. And if we could learn, and again, I've talked about this on many of our podcasts, but I always think of Dr. Wayne Dyer, and he was sharing the story of walking through a very disruptive event, and he held the residency of the divine. And again, it can truly, for me personally, it can be whatever that means to you, but divine meaning light, love,
yes,
calm, peace,
yes.
organization in opposition of discourse and all of that. And he really was able to not say a word and just kind of move through. And he was practicing this, living, being a living expression of the divine. And this is what I wasn't thinking of it in that kind of deep spiritual way in the moment at this wedding, but I was aware through my own writing and training, my own
Mm,
education, what you know as I call the internal living library. I started pulling in on observe and expand and advance your presence now in this moment so that this would benefit the collective somewhere else. And it is not, as I'm going to use the word, which I don't usually use this word, difficult, as many people would think this is. You can do this right after this podcast and you listen to it. You can do this in your partnership. You can do this in your work environment. When you can do this when you're driving your car, you can start to practice holding the energetic frequency of the divine, just the way you drive or the way you walk into a store or the way you greet someone. And you will begin to evolve, which leads us into a self-actualized life by
There we go.
feeling your resistance to that expression. You'll feel it. You'll either be uncomfortable, or it'll make you short, or it'll make you reactive. That is your cue to go deeper into that exploration of what is the purpose and the meaning of me being here in this moment, and how can I evolve my perception, my output, so that I add value and divinity into the collective experience. And don't worry whether someone understands it, whether they're connecting with it. They will be so unaware of what you're doing. And this is the beauty of becoming a self-actualized divine human. Understanding that that meaning and that purpose is for you and you alone, and you do it with intentional energy for the collective betterment of one another. Now we've got a global movement that is of upper force, upper level.
Yes. It's so interesting that you were talking about that now, about having it in everyday life. And I remember when I was a tween. Yeah, I was a tween, I think. I don't know if you recall, but and I actually don't even know if you guys had this craze in the United States, but there were the Armstrong bracelets that got released, right?
Oh my God,
Right.
absolutely.
And then immediately after that came the WWJD bracelets, right? What would Jesus do?
Yep.
And at the time, I just thought, oh, that is such a silly fad. It's yet again just commercializing what should be a deeply spiritual experience. Notice I was not in my in my best divine self at that point in time, automatically casting aspersions and judgment. Looking back now, that is actually a beautiful physical reminder of what it is to quite literally walk with the divine.
Yeah.
Because if you've got something on your wrist that when you're in a situation and it's testing you, and you just have this brace, you go, okay,
Yeah.
well, what would Jesus do? If you have a true understanding of how these ascended masters express themselves,
Mm.
suddenly you slip into a meditative state. You might not drop to the floor into full lotus position, okay,
Yeah.
in the middle of a bank or whatever it is that you're dealing with, the DMV, for instance.
Right.
Um, but you can just in your mind go, okay, what would an ascended master, and insert whoever it is that you
Yeah.
happen to follow,
Yeah.
what would they do in this situation? How would they behave? How would they choose? Because remember, it's always a choice.
Right.
How would they choose to show love in this situation and
Right.
in this
In
point
that
in time,
moment.
in that
And
moment?
let me just bring this again back to the self-actualized journey. If you know that you are in the power seat of choice, and you are at every given moment of your life, no outside force should have directive over you. Now, again, this is our conversation. I know that there's points of conversation where, yes, outside force does have directive, but we're talking about having fun with this and exploring all of the different ways to tap into the meaning of life and seeing divinity every day. And we, at Jekyll, we had those negative, positive, neutral. Which one are you? And we had these bands, and there's thousands of them all over that we've given them different states, and I've brought them to different countries. I've left them in places because it is that reminder: negative, positive, neutral. Which one am I? And
Hmm.
as you know, that's what the science of empowerment, that is what the book, I live this way. So I have trained my mind, my body, my consciousness to always be connecting. When I feel that rise going and it's a negative, I immediately go into a thought process. I run the principles. I think of a power quote. I go into a quote from a religious person. I think of maybe listening to something out in the world where a general gave a speech at, a graduation at a university. This is the divine in action. This is the divine presenting itself for us to tap into, and reminding ourselves always we are in the power seat of choice. And when you connect to a purpose and a meaning, and you can create your own if you need to. It's okay. However we move through the day, it's do it in a way that evolves your mind, that elevates your consciousness, that deepens and enriches your connection for yourself so that you can then gift that out into the world. You can be a point of light or goodness or positivity or divine in every moment. And it really is not as challenging as it appears, right? On the offset, right? It's like at the starting block of a race, your mind, oh my God, am I going to hit it right when the gun goes off? What if I trip? Someone's going to be faster than
Right.
me. I'm on the inside lane. I like the outside lane. All of these life conditions. Boy, when you start, you just run like the wind. You just want to win. You want to run. You've got that energy. Nothing is ever going to be exactly how we need it to be to make perfect sense.
Mm,
Nothing.
no.
Take the stories, take the history, take the reasoning, right? There's a reason why Jesus has become the strength of his story for so long. There's something in that's seated within the human condition that we have these representations of divinity, and there's present day ones too, and this may seem odd for people, but you can look at a Tony Robbins, right, feeding millions of people. That is divinity in
Right.
action.
Right.
Right, and again, because I we don't like to always name names and put certain titles to certain people, but this is the point. There is a janitor at your children's school. There's a stay-at-home mom on the PTA. There's a dad working every day and that comes home and then still goes off and coaches the sports team. However you want to look at it, this is divinity. This is the beauty and the purpose and the meaning of connecting to ourself and one another. And when you step back and you learn to release the judgment of someone else's thought process, someone else's belief system, and you just look at it as it's all purposeful, it all has meaning, it is all divine, then we begin to really create an experience, a human experience that
Mhm.
shifts the way we experience our life.
So something that's a little bit tongue in cheek, but that I'd like to use to kind of start wrapping up. There was this meme some time back, and it's a picture of Jesus doing the Sermon on the Mount, and the caption reads, "And truly I say to you," um, how does it go again? Oh, basically, oh, that what he said at the outset. The law and the prophets comes down to these two things: love your God and your neighbor as yourself. And then you see someone like kind of putting their hand up, and the caption on the bottom reads goes, "But Lord, what if they don't believe the same as we do, or if they look different than us?" And the next caption reads from Jesus, "Did I stutter?"
Exactly.
It's
Exactly.
literally that. And this is the thing. I think we as humans, we like depth. We like things to be complicated. But
Right.
at its core, this universe is not complicated. It's
No.
very simple. So when Jesus says the meaning of life is, and all the ascended masters say the same thing: love your God, love your neighbor as yourself. So you got to love yourself too. Do those three things,
Yeah.
you've gotten life. You've won at life, quite literally.
Yes.
There's
And
there's
again,
nothing more to it.
practice this now going out after this podcast. Practice what the divinity means to you. If you're already connected to that feeling and that answer, beautiful. Now continue to bring it out into the world without judgment. So it's not, if you don't believe in what I believe in, there's something wrong with you. You are, and then fill in. No, the divinity would simply say, let one another believe in what they believe in, but let it be the belief in it as a collective, which means, again, release the judgment and all of
Right.
the labels. And Oh, it's so important to really heal and shift our world, to let all of that nonsense become antiquated, and let's move into a new way of thinking and being in this world, where it really is driven by the force of the universal natures of, we we're here to be kind, we're here to be compassionate, we're here to love and express it in our own unique ways. I really find, and then I know we're moving on to our tarot and our power quote. um, Look at one another and ask yourself before you engage, what would create happiness for that person? What would bring a smile to their face? What would calm their heart? What would matter to them? And boy, I'll tell you, when you start doing that, it humbles you. It
Oh,
puts you in
hugely.
such a beautiful position. You realize, um, it's much simpler to love than it is to distort.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely. That's kind of actually the message from the reading today. It
Oh,
is much easier to love than it is to distort. The reading shows quite clearly that all the love that we could possibly want, all the blessings, is literally right here in front of us. What's happening though is, and this is very much on the spiritual side of the draw, things move so quickly around us
yeah.
that it's easy for us to get swept up in that motion and forget to let go of the polarity. So that's
Mhm.
also come through very strongly. Every single card here that deals with polarity is saying, turn it on its head, let it go. It's
Yeah.
not real, it's an illusion, right?
Yeah.
So, separation between myself and my neighbor, it's an illusion. We are all expressions of the divine, which means that we all come from a common source, which means we are all quite literally one.
Yes, we really are. We're one
It's,
expressing itself in the texture and the colors and the fabric of thought and creation and
yeah,
artistry and alchemy and magic and intellect, intelligence. But we really are. We
we
really
really are.
are
I mean,
one.
could you imagine if the cells that make up your heart suddenly decided that they intensely disliked the cells that make up your blood?
We die.
And yes, that's what we do as a race. We
That's
literally
what
decide that
really,
yes, we're all one organism, but actually I'm gonna hate this other cell.
I love that. I don't think I've really truly, other than in a scientific framework, have ever heard it quite placed that way. If internally our organs, our mechanism, our life force decided to distort any one part of it, such as, which is why we have disease of the mind and the body and the biology, look what would happen. That's a beautiful way to go forward. All of this heart, brain, mind, spirit, divinity, coherence, it's all moving together. And boy, what a beautiful system at work when we
Mm,
do work it all the way through. So this is
absolutely.
amazing, because for those of you who are just joining or just listening, at the end of our podcast, Stefan reads the tarot cards, which are always so spot on into the discussion, and then to add the divinity of coincidences are not really out in the world, that there is a meaning to everything. I pull up
Absolutely.
power, yeah, I pull up a power quote from the book before we go on, not even on air, before Stefan and I come into studio. And today, the power quote is so fitting. What you allow to enter into your potential brilliance will be determined by what you are willing to keep out.
Hmm. And that literally
Allow the,
fits in perfectly with the tarot that we just read.
allow the divinity in, keep
Push the
the
polarity out.
distortion out. It's very simple. Keep it
Love
simple,
it.
folks.
Keep it, there we go. Keep it simple. On that note, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much, as always, for joining us on the Shift and Co. for our special 4th of July episode.
Yeah.
Um, as always, if you are looking to work with us, the link for that is in our description. the beautiful book, The Science of Empowerment, written by its equally beautiful author, Laura Brennan Ballet. The link for that is in the bio as well. You can get it off of Amazon. And please do like, share, and subscribe. These conversations are so much more meaningful when people actually ask us questions, join in on the debate, join in on the discussion, so we can hear everybody's points of view, because our differences make us stronger. They don't have to divide us.
Absolutely. Bye.
Bye, everybody. Have a wonderful day further. Bye.